The moment police sirens screamed outside our house, my husband turned toward me with a look I had never seen before. "You called them?" he whispered. Not angry, not shocked, terrified. I understood exactly why. To anyone entering that basement without context, everything looked wrong. A hidden room behind a wall. A teenage girl with rope loosely around her wrists. A man who had been sneaking downstairs every midnight for 3 weeks. I had known the truth for less than a day. David had told me everything the previous evening. His daughter Mara, the man hunting her for 17 years. The rope she tied around her own wrists each night to manage her panic attacks, placed there by no one but herself. The police didn't know any of that yet. Before we walked upstairs, David had pushed the hidden panel wide open deliberately. He wanted them to see the room clearly. The blankets, the food, the lamp, the care arranged inside that small space. Better that than letting them discover it and form the worst possible conclusion. Mara sat on the floor crying quietly, rope loose around her wrists. "Let her speak first," I said. "She knows what to say." The front door burst open upstairs. Heavy footsteps filled the hallway. "Police!" a voice shouted. My husband looked at me one last time. "My name is Danielle Mercer. 3 weeks earlier, none of this had existed in my world. If you enjoy suspenseful stories where secrets slowly unravel, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I share new stories like this every day, and some of them take turns you will never see coming." The police rushed past me and into the basement. My husband raised his hands slowly. "I'm not dangerous," he said. "Please listen before you." An officer pushed him back. "Step away from the room." Mara was still inside the hidden space, crying harder now. One officer moved toward her while another kept his eyes locked on my husband. My stomach tightened with every passing second. Had I just made everything worse? "Ma'am," one officer said. "Are you the one who called?" "Yes." "What did you report?" "A suspicious person watching my house from across the street, standing still in the dark near the oak tree. I believed they were dangerous." The officer studied me carefully. "Not the girl?" he asked. "I already knew about her," I said. My husband explained everything to me the night before. Someone was watching this house, and I was afraid he would act before we could move her to safety. He exchanged a quick glance with his partner. Upstairs, the patrol car lights painted the basement windows in pulses of blue and red. The room felt smaller and colder. The officer knelt beside Mara. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're safe now." She looked up slowly. Her eyes moved past the officer, past the other police, and straight toward my husband. Then she said the words that made the entire room go completely still. "Please don't arrest him." The officer beside Mara knelt down carefully. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "No." Her voice was quiet but steady. He looked around the small room methodically. Blankets stacked in one corner, food containers on a table, a sleeping bag on the floor, a lamp on an extension cord. It looked like a carefully arranged refuge rather than a prison. "Why are you in here?" the officer asked. Mara glanced briefly at my husband. He gave a single nod. "My dad said it was the safest place," she said. "He's been protecting me." The officer stood and looked at David. "Sir, is she your daughter?" "Yes." The officer turned back to Mara. "And the rope on your wrists?" "I put it on myself," she said without hesitation. "I have severe panic attacks. When I wake up somewhere unfamiliar, I run before I'm fully awake. The rope is loose. I tie it myself every night. He has never tied it. Not once." She held out her wrists calmly. The rope had several inches of slack. Nothing about it suggested restraint. The officer examined it carefully, then rose. "You're saying he hasn't held you here against your will?" "He is the reason I'm still alive," she said. The room went completely quiet. Mara looked toward the basement window. "There's a man who has been searching for me for years," she whispered. "I think he's already outside." 3 weeks earlier, I had woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of the bedroom door closing. At first, I thought I had imagined it. The house was dark and quiet, but the other side of the bed was empty. My husband had always been a deep sleeper, the kind who never woke before morning. So when I saw the empty pillow beside me, something felt immediately wrong. I listened carefully. Soft footsteps moved down the hallway. Then the faint creak of the basement door opening. I sat up slowly. The red numbers on the clock read 12:17 a.m. A minute later, the door closed again, Silence filled the house. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he couldn't sleep, maybe he was grabbing something from storage. But the next night it happened again. And the night after that. Every time it was exactly the same. Midnight, quiet footsteps, basement door, gone for nearly an hour. Then he would return to bed like nothing had happened. At first I asked him about it casually. "You were up late last night?" I said one morning over coffee. He didn't hesitate. "Just checking something downstairs." "What kind of thing?" "Old boxes." His answer sounded believable, but something about the way he avoided my eyes made a small knot form in my stomach, and that knot kept growing heavier with every passing night. By the end of the second week, I could no longer pretend it was harmless. The pattern was too perfect. Midnight, basement, 1 hour, every single night without exception. One evening while he was in the shower, I stood at the top of the basement stairs staring down into the darkness. The light was off. The door was closed, but the air felt heavy, like the room itself was holding a secret. I almost went down right then, but something stopped me. Instead, that night, after he fell asleep, I opened my laptop and ordered 2 small security cameras. They arrived the next afternoon. Simple white cameras, no bigger than my palm. The first I installed above the hallway bookshelf, angled at the basement door. The second I attached to a high corner shelf near the furnace, pointing toward the far wall. He never noticed either of them. That evening we watched television together. He laughed at a joke. He kissed my forehead before bed. Everything felt completely normal. Until midnight came. I lay still, pretending to sleep. A few minutes later, the mattress shifted. Soft footsteps crossed the floor. The bedroom door opened, then closed. I waited 10 minutes. Then I reached for my phone and opened the camera app. The hallway appeared on one feed, the dim basement corner on the other. And I watched my husband unlock the basement door. What happened next would change everything. The hallway camera showed my husband standing at the basement door, holding a small key I had never seen before. For a moment he just stood there, looking over his shoulder, checking the house, checking me. My chest tightened. Then he unlocked the door and stepped inside. I switched to the basement camera feed. The image was dim at first, then the basement light flickered on. My husband walked slowly into frame, moving directly toward the furnace. He glanced once toward the stairs, making sure he was alone. Then he reached behind the furnace pipe and pulled at something low against the wall. My breath caught in my throat. A thin panel shifted. A hidden door, concealed behind the furnace in a wall I had walked past for 8 years. My husband stepped through it. The panel slid closed behind him. The basement camera showed nothing but the empty furnace and the still, quiet room. My hands began to shake, because that room had never existed before. Or if it had, my husband had spent 8 years making absolutely sure I never knew. I kept the basement camera feed open and watched. 40 minutes passed. Then the panel moved again. My husband stepped out alone, closed the wall carefully, and walked back toward the stairs. I switched to the hallway camera. He moved calmly back to the bedroom. I closed my eyes and lay still, but sleep never came. The next morning, I watched the recordings again, and again, and again. Each time I hoped I had misunderstood something. Maybe the hidden panel was just an old storage compartment. Maybe there was nothing inside worth hiding. But every time the same thing played out. My husband pulled the wall open and disappeared inside, and every time he emerged carrying something, I rewound the basement camera footage carefully. In the dim image, I could make out him carrying a plastic container, then a water bottle, then what looked like folded clothing. He was bringing supplies to someone. I looked around the kitchen. The same kitchen we had shared for years, the same house where I believed I knew every corner. Suddenly, it all felt like a stranger's home. When my husband came downstairs, he looked completely normal. He poured coffee, asked if I wanted toast, kissed my cheek before leaving for work. The ordinary kindness made my stomach twist even harder. Because if he could hide something like this, what else was he hiding? That night I watched both cameras again. Midnight, just like before. He walked to the basement door, unlocked it, and disappeared through the hidden panel. This time, the basement camera caught him carrying a heavy grocery bag, like food for more than one night. The knot in my chest tightened. Someone was definitely down there. And that thought sent a chill straight down my spine. 3 nights later, the footage changed everything again. Until then, I had only seen him bring supplies: food bags, water bottles, blankets. Once he carried a small portable heater through the hidden panel. Each time he stayed about an hour before returning to bed like nothing had happened. But on the 3rd night, something different appeared on the basement camera. I was watching the live feed when my husband stepped back out of the hidden room. He closed the panel carefully, then turned back toward it, and spoke. The basement camera was close enough to the furnace wall to show his face clearly. His expression was calm, reassuring. He was talking to someone still inside the room. My entire body went cold. He stood there for a long moment, listening, then nodded slowly, like someone had answered him from behind the wall. A wave of panic rushed through my chest. Part of me wanted to wake him up right then, demand the truth. But something held me back. If he had guarded this secret so carefully for so long, confronting him too early might cause him to hide everything deeper. So instead I kept watching, waiting, gathering every piece of footage I could, because whatever was behind that wall was no longer just a strange habit. It had become something I could no longer explain away, and the answers felt more dangerous with every passing night. The first time I saw her, my heart nearly stopped. It was just after midnight again. The basement camera showed my husband stepping out of the hidden room as usual, but this time the panel behind him swung wider, and someone stepped into the light. A girl. She looked about 17. Thin and pale, her dark hair hung loose around her face, but what froze the air in my lungs was the rope loosely around her wrists. My hand covered my mouth. She wasn't bound tightly. The rope looked careful, deliberate, but not cruel. Still, it was there, clear and undeniable on the screen. My husband stepped quickly back toward her. He spoke gently, his face soft rather than hard. He handed her a bottle of water. The girl drank slowly, looking around the basement like she was seeing it for the first time. Fear filled her eyes, and suddenly my thoughts raced into dark territory. Kidnapping, trafficking, prisoner. Every terrible word I could imagine. The girl said something. My husband shook his head firmly. Then he guided her gently back toward the hidden room. The panel slid closed. The basement camera showed only the still, empty room again. I sat frozen on the edge of my bed. My hands were shaking. My breath came in shallow bursts. Because in that moment, one overwhelming thought had taken over completely. I might be sleeping beside a man capable of something monstrous. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story so far, consider subscribing. It helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more intense stories like this one. The next morning, I couldn't look at him. Every smile he gave me felt constructed. Every ordinary sentence sounded like a lie. He noticed. "You okay?" he asked over breakfast. "Fine," I said, tired. He studied me for a moment, then looked away. That afternoon, I searched online. Missing girls, recent cases, police reports from the surrounding counties. I scrolled for 2 hours, stomach tightening with every face on the screen. None of them matched, which didn't make me feel better. It only meant I didn't have a name yet. By evening, the fear had sharpened into something colder. Not panic, not confusion. Decision. If that girl was being held against her will, waiting was not something I could justify any longer. But confronting him without proof was dangerous. If he was capable of this, I had no idea how he might react. I needed something undeniable first, something I could take directly to the police. I checked both camera recordings from the night before. The rope on her wrists, the hidden room, the careful, deliberate way he guided her back inside. There was a story in that footage. I just needed one more night to capture it clearly. I set both cameras to record continuously. Then I went to bed, lay beside my husband in the dark, and waited for midnight. I didn't sleep at all. At 12:03, the mattress shifted. I was already awake. My phone was already in my hand. He moved through the dark hallway the same way he always did. Quiet, unhurried. Like a man with a routine he had practiced so many times it had become instinct. Both camera feeds opened as he reached the basement door. But something was wrong tonight. His body language was different. Tighter, more alert. He unlocked the door and disappeared down the stairs faster than usual. I switched to the basement feed. The light came on. He crossed to the furnace. But instead of going straight through the panel, he stopped, turned, scanned the empty basement slowly, eyes moving from corner to corner, like he was checking for something he expected to find. My breath went shallow. He stood there for almost a full minute. Then finally he pressed the latch, stepped through the wall, and was gone. I watched the basement feed without blinking. 10 minutes passed, 15. Then the panel opened again. The girl stepped out, her hands loosely tied as always. But tonight her expression was completely different. She wasn't scared, she was furious. She turned toward my husband before he had fully stepped through the wall, and the words left her mouth before he could stop her. I couldn't hear them, but I could read them clearly. "You promised he would never find me." The words landed on the basement camera like a shout even without sound. My husband froze. The girl stepped forward, pointing hard toward the stairs. He blocked her path immediately, both hands raised. She shook her head and stepped sideways. He matched her. This went on for almost a minute, her pushing, him redirecting, neither of them giving ground. Then he grabbed her shoulders gently but firmly and said something directly into her face. Short, serious. Whatever it was, it stopped her cold. She stood very still, breathing hard, hands still loosely tied in front of her. Then, slowly, she sat down on the floor and pulled her knees to her chest. My husband sat beside her. He handed her a bowl of food. She ate in silence, shoulders rigid, staring at the wall. And I sat in the dark, watching, my mind finally beginning to shift. This didn't look like control. This looked like two people trapped by the same fear, arguing about the same danger, from different angles. She wasn't trying to escape from him. She was trying to go towards something, or away from something. Something outside. Something that terrified them both. The question that had been circling for 2 weeks finally landed hard. Who was she hiding from? And why did my husband look just as afraid as she did? The next day, I went back through every recording. Not slowly this time, with purpose. I wasn't looking for new behavior anymore. I was looking for details I had missed, and I found one. 4 days earlier, when my husband stepped out of the hidden room, he had been carrying a folder. I had barely registered it at the time. But zooming into the still image on the basement camera, something became clear. A document was visible at the folder's edge, and printed in the top corner was a last name. His last name. My chest tightened immediately. A legal document with his surname could mean a dozen things. A custody arrangement, a birth record, a protection order. Or it could be something else entirely. I replayed the argument from the night before. You promised he would never find me. Find her, not escape her, not leave. Find. She wasn't trying to get away from my husband. She was afraid of someone else reaching her. Everything I thought I understood shifted quietly on its axis. My husband wasn't hiding a crime. He was hiding a person. And the folder with his name on it suggested a connection deeper than I had considered. That afternoon, I made a decision. I was going into the basement. Not at midnight. Not through the cameras. In person. While he was outside, I needed to see for myself. He was mowing the lawn when I went downstairs. I had maybe 20 minutes. The basement smelled like old wood and furnace dust. I crossed directly to the wall behind the pipes, exactly where the basement camera had shown the panel opening a dozen times. From the outside, it looked like nothing. Solid concrete, no seam, no handle. I pressed my palms flat against the surface and moved them slowly along the wall. A minute passed, then 2. Nothing. Then my fingers caught something behind the furnace pipe. Small, metal, cold. A latch, barely the width of a thumb, positioned so that only someone who already knew where to look would ever find it. My heart was hammering now. I pressed it. The wall shifted. A thin crack of light appeared at the edge. I pushed gently and the panel slid open. The room inside was narrow, lit by a single hanging lamp. Blankets on the floor. Food containers on a small table beside a water jug. A space someone had made livable. The girl was sitting against the far wall, knees drawn up. She looked up the instant the panel moved. Our eyes met. A full second of silence passed between us. Then she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "You're not supposed to know about me. I'm not going to hurt you," I said. She didn't move, but her eyes stayed on my face, reading it carefully. "You're his wife," she said. "Yes." Something in her shoulders released by just a degree. "I wondered when you'd find out." Before I could respond, we both heard it at the same time. The front door. Her eyes went wide. "Close it," she said quietly. Right now, please." I pulled the panel shut behind me and stepped quickly away from the wall, reaching for a storage box on the nearby shelf, as though that was what I had come down for. My husband's footsteps crossed the floor above. Then the basement door opened. He appeared at the bottom of the stairs and his eyes found me immediately. "What are you looking for?" "Winter decorations," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. Then he nodded slowly and walked toward the furnace. And as he passed the wall, without breaking stride, without even glancing down, his hand dropped to the hidden latch and checked it. One smooth automatic motion. A man who had done it 1,000 times. He knew exactly where it was. He knew I had been near it. And in that moment, from the slight tightening around his eyes, I understood. He knew the secret was finally coming apart. Dinner that night was the quietest we had ever sat through. He watched me. I watched him. Neither of us said anything that mattered. Afterward, I went to bed early and lay still in the dark, phone already in hand, waiting. At 12:06, he moved. I opened both feeds. He reached the basement in under a minute, faster than usual, like a man who had already made up his mind about something before he even stood up. The basement light came on. The panel opened. The girl came out first tonight. She was already talking before he was fully through the wall, her mouth moving quickly, urgently. Her hands gestured upward. Toward the house. Toward me. My husband listened without interrupting. Then he said something short, and she went still. He looked toward the basement stairs for a long moment. His jaw was set. Something in his expression had changed from every other night I had watched him down there. He wasn't just managing the situation anymore. He was deciding something. I watched him glance once more toward the ceiling. Then he turned back to the girl, took a slow breath, and began talking. Whatever he said took several minutes. She listened with her arms folded, then finally gave a single nod. I set my phone down and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, everything was going to change. I felt certain of it before I even knew how. The next morning, I went looking for answers while he was at work. I wasn't searching blindly this time. I had a name, I had a last name on a document. I had 17 years and a hidden room and a girl who was terrified of being found. I started with court records, legal filings, public archives. Most of it was ordinary, old addresses, nothing alarming. Then a local news article surfaced, dated 17 years ago. Short. Just a few paragraphs. It described threats made against a witness in a serious criminal case. The witness had testified against a man connected to a violent investigation. Before sentencing, that man had made explicit threats against the witness's family. My husband's name wasn't in the article, but every detail fit like a key into a lock. And near the end, a single sentence stopped me completely. The witness's infant daughter had been placed in a protected arrangement due to credible threats against her life. Her location had been withheld indefinitely. I read it 4 times. An infant. Hidden for safety. A dangerous man with 17 years of reasons to find her. The girl who looked about 17. The folder with his last name. The rope she wore like armor against her own fear. It all collapsed into one clear, simple truth. She wasn't a prisoner. She was his daughter. And someone had been hunting her since before she could walk. That evening, I waited for him to come home. My heart pounded until I heard his key in the door. When he saw me standing at the table with folded hands, his expression shifted immediately. "You've been reading something," he said quietly. I didn't answer the question. "There's a girl in our basement," I said. The words landed heavily in the air between us. He closed his eyes. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down. "I wanted to tell you," he said, "for a long time. But you didn't. I was trying to protect you from all of it." "Protect me from what exactly?" I asked. He looked toward the basement door. "Her name is Mara," he said. "She's 17. She's my daughter from before we met, from a relationship I never spoke about." I stayed quiet. When she was an infant, I testified against a man involved in something serious, something violent. He paused. He made it very clear that my family would pay for that testimony. "And he's still looking for her?" I asked. "He was released from prison 2 years ago. Since then, I've been moving her between safe locations." He looked at me directly. "I brought her here because I ran out of places to go." The silence stretched long and painful. "Why not tell me?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, and his hesitation said everything. Because the fewer people who knew, the safer she was, he said finally. Every person who knows becomes a potential target. But I'm your wife. I know. He rubbed his face with both hands. I know that. And it wasn't fair to you. I sat down slowly across from him. How long has she been down there? 3 weeks. I needed time to arrange the next location. And the rope? I asked. He looked up. Her idea, he said quietly. She's had severe panic attacks since she was 13. When she wakes up disoriented in an unfamiliar place, she runs without thinking. Once she nearly ran out the front door of a safe house at night. He shook his head. The rope is loose. She ties it herself before she sleeps. It keeps her grounded when she wakes up scared. I let that settle slowly. She knows I've been watching the cameras, I said. She told me last night. She knew you had found her. You spoke through the panel. He nodded. She pointed upward on the camera that night to warn me. The weight of it pressed down on the room. What happens now? I asked. I move her again, tomorrow if possible. Then I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the empty street. The darkness outside felt still. Too still, and suddenly something in that stillness felt deeply wrong. A shape moved near the oak tree across the street, a person, standing perfectly still in the shadow of the trunk, watching the house. There, I said quietly. My husband was beside me in seconds. His entire body went rigid when he saw it. How long? He whispered. I just noticed. He stepped back from the window immediately, pulling me with him. We need to get Mara. Right now. He moved toward the basement door. I stood at the window for one more second. The shape hadn't moved. It was just standing there in the dark, completely still, facing our house. My hands found my phone. Every instinct pulled in 2 directions at once. Calling the police might bring help, or it might force a dangerous man into acting before they arrived. But the figure hadn't moved, and somewhere outside on that dark street someone was watching a house where a 17-year-old girl was hiding. I opened the phone, dialed emergency services. There's a person watching my house from across the street, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. I believe they may be dangerous. Please send someone as quickly as possible. I gave the address. Then I followed my husband down to the basement. He was already at the hidden panel. Mara stood inside the doorway, awake, reading his face. He found us, didn't he? She said. Neither of us answered. But she already knew. The police sirens grew louder until they stopped directly outside our house. Blue and red lights flooded the basement windows. My husband looked at Mara, then at me. We're not hiding from them, he said. Not from the police. He walked to the hidden panel and pushed it wide open. He looked at the room inside. The blankets, the food, the lamp. A refuge, not a prison. I want them to see it clearly, he said quietly. Mara stepped out. She wrapped the rope loosely around her wrists the way she did when anxiety closed in. Stay calm, David told her. You know exactly what to say. She nodded. The 3 of us walked toward the basement stairs. Heavy footsteps pounded across the floor above us. The front door burst open. Police. Anyone inside? Officers came down before we reached the top step. 2 of them. Hands near their holsters. Eyes moving quickly across the room. Sir, stop. Hands where I can see them. My husband raised both hands calmly. Please let my daughter speak first, he said. Mara stepped forward. He's my father, she said clearly. He's been hiding me from someone dangerous. The officers exchanged a glance. One of them looked at me. Ma'am, you placed this call? Yes. Someone is watching this house from across the street, near the oak tree. The officer reached for his radio immediately. Sir, the other said firmly, start talking. My husband lowered his hands slightly and spoke in a measured, careful tone. My name is David Mercer. 17 years ago I testified against a man named Carl Voss in a federal case involving organized crime. He was convicted. He was released 2 years ago. The officer's expression sharpened. And the girl? My daughter, Mara. She was an infant when I testified. Voss made explicit threats against my family before sentencing. He paused. I've been moving her between safe locations ever since he was released. The officer turned to Mara. Is this true? Yes, she said. Every word. And the rope on your wrists? The officer asked carefully. Mara glanced at her wrists. I put it on myself, she said. I have panic attacks. When I wake up in an unfamiliar place, I run before I'm fully conscious. She met the officer's eyes steadily. The rope keeps me from doing something dangerous before I'm fully awake. I've tied it myself every night for months. The rope was loose, with several inches of slack. Nothing restraining about it. He stood slowly. You're saying your father hasn't held you here against your will? He's the only reason I'm still alive, she said. The room went quiet. Outside, through the basement window, the street remained still. But somewhere out there, the man who had spent years hunting this girl was close. And the police were finally here. One officer moved upstairs to radio details to dispatch. The second stayed in the basement with us, his posture relaxing slightly but his attention still sharp. My husband looked exhausted, the kind that comes from years of carrying something no one should carry alone. Mara stood close beside him, her shoulder against his arm. I watched from across the basement. The bond between them was unmistakable, not captor and prisoner, father and daughter, bound by years of fear and survival. I stepped forward slowly. I should have told you about the cameras, I said to my husband, and I should have told you about her, he replied. Mara looked between us quietly. You were both trying to protect someone, she said. The officer spoke again. Mr. Mercer, if this Carl Voss has been actively searching for your daughter, there should be existing reports on file. There are, my husband said, filed 2 years ago, when he was first spotted near a previous location. The detective's name is Harlan. He knows the full case history. The officer made a note. Then his radio crackled loudly. Unit 3, a voice said, sharp with urgency. We have a suspicious male in a vehicle parked 2 houses east of your location. Dark sedan, stationary for over an hour watching the property. My husband's face turned pale. Because that meant the man who had been searching for Mara for 17 years had finally found us. The officers rushed upstairs within seconds. The one who stayed told us firmly to remain in the basement. David put his arm around Mara. Through the basement window we watched 2 flashlight beams cut across the dark street, approaching the parked car from both sides. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the car door flew open. A figure ran hard toward the far corner of the block. Shouts cut through the night air. Stop! Police! He was fast, but the officers were faster. 30 seconds later, there was the sound of a brief struggle on the pavement. Then silence, then the click of handcuffs. Inside the basement, Mara pressed her face against my husband's shoulder and began to cry. Not from fear this time, from something much closer to relief. Her whole body shook with it. My husband held her without speaking. Minutes later, the officer returned down the basement stairs. He's in custody, he said. We found photographs of this property in his vehicle, multiple angles, several days' worth. My husband closed his eyes briefly. He also had a handgun with the safety removed, the officer continued. He was ready to move tonight, my husband said quietly. The officer nodded. It appears so. And in that moment, I finally understood what my husband had been doing in this basement every single night. He had not been hiding a crime. He had been preventing one. The police cars stayed outside until well past sunrise. Officers took statements from each of us separately. Photographs were taken of the basement room, the rope, the supplies. Everything was documented. When the patrol car carrying Carl Voss finally drove away down the empty street, the house felt like it exhaled. Inside the kitchen, Mara sat wrapped in a blanket from the basement, her hands folded around a mug of tea. My husband sat beside her, still and quiet, his hands finally calm. I watched them from the counter. 8 years of marriage and an entire piece of his life I had never known. But I understood why now. I walked over and sat across from them. I'm sorry, I said, for calling without warning you first. My husband shook his head slowly. You saw a girl with rope around her wrists in a hidden room, he said. You did exactly what you should have done. Mara looked up at me with clear, tired eyes. If you hadn't called tonight, she said softly, he would have kept watching the house, waiting for a better moment when the police weren't there. My call had nearly unraveled everything. But it had also ended a 17-year threat in a single night. As the morning light touched the kitchen windows, I looked at the basement door. It stood wide open. For the first time in weeks, there were no secrets left behind it. If this story kept you hooked until the end, don't forget to subscribe. There are many more suspenseful stories coming, and you won't want to miss the next one. If you were in my place and saw a hidden room with a girl and rope around her wrists on your camera, would you have called the police too? Or would you have confronted your husband first? Tell me honestly in the comments.